It was a sticky, late August morning when Marcus Ellison parked his car outside the West Haven Police Department, a mid-size station nestled in the foothills of North Carolina. The early sunlight danced across his windshield as he stepped out wearing faded jeans, a basic t-shirt, and worn-out sneakers. Nothing about him suggested that he was a high-ranking officer, let alone the newly appointed chief of police. And that was exactly the point. As a black man taking charge of a department marred by internal complaints and rumors of toxic culture, Marcus wasn't interested in parades or photo ops. He wanted truth. And truth, he knew, didn't show up when everyone was on their best behavior. He adjusted his baseball cap and scanned the parking lot. Officers chatted in groups, sipping coffee and cracking jokes. No one gave him a second glance. Good. His appointment had been kept under wraps for this reason. The official welcome was set for later that morning, but Marcus had decided to arrive early unannounced to witness the real heartbeat of the station. He entered through the rear side door, unnoticed. The inside was exactly what you'd expect: sterile floors, cheap fluorescent lighting, and the smell of burnt coffee wafting through the air. He took slow steps through the main hallway, quietly observing. That's when he heard the voice. "Hey. You lost or something?" a cocky voice barked. Marcus turned to see a white officer approaching with swagger in his step and a mocking grin stretched across his face. His badge read J. Simmons. Simmons looked him up and down. "This NT no drop-in center. You lookin' for a handout?" A few officers nearby laughed. One of them nudged another, clearly entertained. Marcus said nothing, letting the moment breathe. But Simmons wasn't done. He stepped closer, his voice louder now for the benefit of his growing audience. "People like you don't belong here," he said, jabbing a finger toward Marcus's chest. "You need to take your wandering somewhere else." Then, without warning, Simmons spit. The glob struck Marcus on the cheek. Laughter erupted behind him. One officer doubled over, howling. Another muttered, "That'll teach him." Marcus stood still. His blood simmered, but his face remained unreadable. He slowly reached into his pocket, pulled out a clean cloth, and wiped his face. Then, in a calm voice, he asked, "Is this the kind of welcome every visitor gets, or just the ones who look like me?" Simmons chuckled. "Just the ones who don't belong." Marcus didn't respond. He simply turned and walked down the hallway. Moments later, the intercom crackled to life, "All personnel to the main briefing room. Mandatory attendance." Inside the room, the usual chatter buzzed, officers trickling in with mugs in hand, exchanging gossip and half-laughed jokes. Simmons leaned against the back wall, still basking in the attention of his earlier performance. Captain Morales stood at the front, holding a folder. "All right, everyone, let's bring it in." The voices quieted. "As you all know, Chief Landers retired last month. Today, we welcome our new chief of police, someone with years of experience and a vision for this department." The side door opened. Marcus stepped through. All eyes turned. Conversations froze mid-sentence. Mugs paused halfway to lips. Jaws dropped. Marcus walked to the podium with quiet confidence, the same folder in hand that bore the department's insignia. He looked across the room, eyes scanning each stunned face. Some officers looked away. Others stared in disbelief. Simmons stood rigid, his complexion pale, the grin wiped clean off his face. Marcus set the folder down and began, his voice even but firm. "My name is Marcus Ellison. As of today, I am your new chief." The silence was suffocating. "I came in early this morning," he continued. "In plain clothes. I didn't want to see a version of this department that was curated for appearances. I wanted to see the truth." He paused, letting that land. "And I saw it." A few officers shifted uncomfortably. "What I experienced in just a few short minutes was not just unprofessional, it was inexcusable. Let me be clear, The behavior I witnessed will not be tolerated moving forward. He glanced briefly toward Simmons, then returned his gaze to the room. There are changes coming. And they start now. The weight of his words settled over the room like a storm cloud. No one laughed now. No one dared speak. Marcus closed the folder. Dismissed. A heavy silence settled over the room as Marcus Ellison stepped closer to the podium, his voice calm but edged with steel. Respect, he said, his gaze cutting through the crowd, isn't something you give when it's convenient. It's the foundation of who we are in this uniform. Without it, we fail not just each other, but every single person we swore to serve. No one moved. No one dared. He let the silence linger like a weight, watching as the officers before him began to shift uncomfortably under his stare. What had seemed like a harmless humiliation just an hour ago now hung in the air like shame. This morning, many of you left, Marcus continued, his voice quiet but unflinching. You thought you were witnessing a nobody getting put in his place. But let me make one thing very clear: everyone who walks through these doors deserves to be treated with dignity. Uniform or not. A few officers looked down. Others fidgeted in place. Marcus didn't ease up. Change is hard, he said, his tone now low and commanding. But I won't tolerate the kind of behavior I saw today. Not from anyone. I don't care how long you've been here or what badge you wear. If you don't respect your fellow human beings, you don't belong in this room. He stepped off the platform slowly, walking with purpose across the floor. The sound of his footsteps echoed in the stillness. Every pair of eyes followed him, wide and uncertain. He stopped just feet away from Officer Simmons. The same man who had mocked him. The same man who had spit on him. Simmons, no longer cocky, shifted uncomfortably. Sweat gathered at his temple. The fire in his eyes from earlier had turned to ash. You, Marcus said, locking eyes with him, are the perfect example of what's broken in this department. Simmons flinched. When you spit in my face, you didn't just insult me, Marcus continued, his voice steady, you disgraced the badge you wear. You insulted the values we're supposed to represent. And you sent a message to everyone watching that some people don't matter. Simmons stumbled over his words. Chief, I didn't realize. That's the point, Marcus snapped, not raising his voice, but slicing through the excuse. You didn't stop to think. You didn't ask. You didn't care. You assumed. And that assumption is why this community doesn't trust us. The room was silent. Not even a breath could be heard. Marcus turned, addressing the entire group. And it wasn't just him, he said, his voice rising just enough to carry. It was the laughter. The approval. The silence from those who knew it was wrong and said nothing. He walked slowly back to the front, then turned to face the crowd once more. This culture, this poison, it doesn't survive without enablers. And I'm telling you now, it ends today. Marcus placed both hands on the podium. I've spent my entire career fighting for justice, not just out there in the streets, but inside departments like this. Places where some officers think the badge makes them untouchable. Places where disrespect gets rewarded with a laugh and a slap on the back. He looked over at Captain Morales, giving a slight nod. Effective immediately, Officer Simmons is suspended. There will be a full investigation into his conduct, and depending on what it reveals, further action will be taken. A collective gasp moved through the room. Simmons' face turned scarlet. His fists clenched, but he said nothing. He could feel the eyes on him now, and none of them were laughing anymore. Marcus didn't flinch. This isn't about revenge, he said plainly. This is about setting a standard. If you can't meet it, you're in the wrong building. He let his eyes pass over each officer, pausing for a fraction longer on those who had laughed the loudest. But if you're willing to change to do better, be better, then I'll lead you. I'll back you. I'll fight for you. But I will also hold you accountable. Every step of the way. With that, he stepped down. The room emptied without the usual small talk or jokes. Officers shuffled out in silence. Simmons walked quickly, avoiding every eye, the weight of shame pulling at his posture. Marcus stayed behind, watching them go. Back in his office, he sat at his desk and released a slow, steady breath. He knew the real work had only just begun. The culture here had taken years to rot. It wouldn't heal overnight. And some people, they never change. But that wasn't going to stop him. He wasn't here to make friends. He was here to fix what was broken. The phone rang. Chief came Captain Morales' voice on the other end. Just wanted to say, you handled that better than most people would be. Thanks, Captain, Marcus said. But now it's time to get to work. His voice sharpened. I want Simmons' full file on my desk by tomorrow morning. Every complaint. Every incident. We're not sweeping anything under the rug. Pull everything we've got, Captain Morales replied. He paused, then added quietly, and Chief. I think you really got through to some of them today. In a good way. Marcus ended the call and allowed himself a small breath of satisfaction before turning his attention to the stack of reports and case files on his desk. There was no time to dwell on small victories. The real work was just beginning. Over the next few weeks, the atmosphere inside the Blue Ridge precinct began to shift. The same officers who once laughed along with Simmons now avoided eye contact when his name was mentioned. Word of his suspension had spread quickly, and the air felt noticeably different, tense, cautious, alert. Marcus made it a point to walk the halls every day, nodding or offering a few words to every officer he passed. His constant presence served as a reminder, there was new leadership here, and it wasn't business as usual anymore. Some took the shift seriously. One afternoon, a young patrol officer named Carla Reyes stopped him in the corridor. Her face was nervous but determined. Chief, she said, I need to be honest. I used to laugh at the things Simmons said, not because I thought it was right. I was scared. I didn't want to become the next target. She paused, then added, but I want to change that. I want to be better. Marcus studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. That's where it starts, he said gently. With one decision. One step forward. But while some officers welcomed change, others fought it. Simmons filed an appeal against his suspension, claiming he had been unfairly targeted. Marcus didn't budge. He knew what he stood for, and he wasn't going to compromise it to appease anyone. An internal audit revealed a troubling pattern in Simmons' record: prior complaints of aggressive behavior, inappropriate remarks during calls, and disciplinary warnings that had quietly been ignored over the years. The appeal was swiftly denied. Marcus made it publicly known, ignoring misconduct, regardless of rank or tenure, was no longer an option. The old ways of protecting bad apples were gone. Still, progress came slowly. Workshops on bias and improving community relations received mixed reactions. Some officers resisted. Others nodded along but remained unchanged. But there were also moments, small, meaningful moments that told Marcus things were moving in the right direction. Like the rookie who asked for advice on de-escalating a tense encounter, or the veteran who requested to be assigned to the community outreach team for the first time in his career. One morning, Marcus attended a neighborhood fair hosted by local families. He stood near the bounce houses and food trucks when a small boy approached him, eyes wide. "Are you really the chief of police?" the child asked, barely above a whisper. "I am," Marcus said, kneeling to meet him at eye level. The boy looked unsure. "My dad says police don't care about people like us." Marcus's expression softened. "I can't change what's already happened," he said gently. "But I'm here because we do care. And if you ever need help, you come to me. Deal?" The boy nodded, a faint smile breaking across his face. That moment, simple and unspoken, meant more to Marcus than any press release or policy. By the end of that first year, the Blue Ridge precinct was still a work in progress. It wasn't flawless. There were still challenges, resistance, and setbacks. But it was undeniably different. Those unwilling to embrace change had left, some resigned, others reassigned. In their place stood new recruits who believed in integrity, in equity, in rebuilding what had been broken. The community, once skeptical and guarded, had started to engage. Meetings that once drew silence now sparked discussion. Families who once kept their distance now waved when patrol cars passed. Late one evening, Marcus stood alone in the precinct's main corridor, watching as officers trickled out after their shifts. The laughter he heard now was different. It wasn't mocking or mean-spirited, it was real. Honest. Shared. For the first time in months, he let himself believe this was working. Progress was slow. The climb was steep. But Marcus Ellison didn't come to Blue Ridge looking for easy victories. He came to build something worth believing in. And now, at last, he knew, change was possible. Difficult, absolutely. But every step forward was worth the fight.